Hey folks, MasakoX here. It's that time again. It's time to make some brand new baddies for Dragon Ball. Now, are you a little confused right now? Well, you see, if you have been a viewer of this channel for a while at this point, you probably might know the drill. This has been something that we've done for years. In these kind of videos, we like to take a time period within the Dragon Ball timeline and create some bad guys for it. Simple as. Using whatever tools we have and what is available within the lore. Now I must point out, this isn't like making an entirely new character based off nothing that exists in the timeline, just for our own needs and desires. This is about repurposing what is in the in-world lore already. We're being resourceful here. And if you like this idea, please drop a like and subscribe so that you can keep up to date with our musings and discussions, and maybe comment what characters that you've come up with in your own time. Cheers! Last time we did this, we decided to utilise quite a lucrative time period within Dragon Ball's history, which had been woefully overlooked. Those 4 years, age 757 to 761, between Goku getting married and Raditz arriving on Earth. It's such a neat place to add lore, to make sure that our heroes won't be having too much of that sweet, sweet family life. And come on, we've got to add at least a little bit of action and peril and something for them to do, right? This is Dragon Ball after all. No one should have to go for that many years without decking someone in the schnoz. It wouldn't feel right. Dr. Goku says it's bad for your health, and you should probably listen to him on that kind of front. Probably not for anything else though, actually related to your overall health. Today it's time for Dragon Ball Z to be diagnosed, and it seems that Z is already pretty packed. But we do have a few ideas which could enhance it even further and be worth your while watching. So first, we need to figure out when we want to put that little mini saga into our overall story. Do we have it near the start perhaps, where power levels are relatively low and the stakes are much higher and you can be more versatile with the plot? Or do we do it near the end where the gaps are bigger? We've got quite a bit of choice. But right off the bat folks, there is no way in Hifel that we're able to fit something like this, what we want to do, in between the Saiyan and Frieza saga. It's just too packed and very short. That first segment too, kind of busy. But fear not, all is not lost. We have some time in between September of age 763 and August of age 764. Those 11 months, which actually is the exact time between the resurrection of Tenshinhan and Chaozu and the return of Mecha Frieza and King Cold, where they have come to head Goku off at the pass and get the former's revenge on the monkey's home soil. And yes, technically something does happen later in age 763, but it gets quickly resolved and is not something worth remembering. Pass the garlic salt, please. This time period is one of those pretty unique opportunities in quite a big way, in fact, as there is no Goku around to sway the odds in our hero's favour by default. And if we consider the anime canon, there's no Vegeta either. So you basically don't have any Saiyans to skew the outcome. You've got to rely on the humans, Piccolo, and the closest thing you have to space monkeys going right now is Gohan. And yes, we are going to use the anime timeline for this, as not having the two head honchos around really leaves us with a good opportunity here. The Earthlings actually having to deal with the threat themselves, which is always exciting. But it is not a trivial challenge, mind you. We can't just give them some kind of meek villain that can be offed easily. Where's the fun in that? The opponent cannot be too weak, so it would have to pose some sort of a challenge for our Namekian, who, as we know at this point in the story, was able to take on second form Frieza rather handily, a pretty even duel at that time. You can certainly make things interesting with that kind of power on deck. But on the other hand, we must remember it cannot be too strong. Otherwise it could undermine the returning of Frieza and King Cold. We do have to admit that was a very thrilling spectacle at the time to see, despite that also undermining everything that had gone down on Namek with Super Saiyan's arrival and Trunks slashy. And then of course later we do have the threat in the form of androids too. Also when it comes to themes, we just had a huge space opera going down. We then sort of had an evil demonic-esque wizard coming around. We can ignore him as much as we like, but the truth is that the theme of this video is not in fact to replace the sagas. And remember, we are going into a Terminator-like story with biological abominations being the main focus. So all of the three big sci-fi tropes, aliens, androids and wizards, oh my, they're already claimed. To repeat that or do it ahead of time wouldn't be very creative. There are some potential points of peril that you could consider in terms of eldritch and hyper-dimensional brands of villainy and sorcery, but this is a little bit too early on in the story to call upon such things. It's quite drastic and final in my opinion. Those are the kind of things you'd save for later on or right at the end as the final boss, not for just a random mini arc. So what can we really do? We're in a very unique and tight spot, where all Z-type villains collide very soon. And if we pulled what we did in early Dragon Ball and undertook a plot with a robotic lead, it could again undermine the impact of the androids, and we don't want to do that. But there is one type of baddie that at this point hasn't been used for quite some time. Humans. And yes, you might say that Dr. Gero is a human villain, so he counts, right? 17 and 18 are genetically enhanced cyborgs who were once human, so what gives? Well, not quite. You see, we're talking about truly human characters, not humanoid characters. And since Gero had already turned himself into an android/robot, yeah. So we tend to put him in the android box in terms of villainry. Okay, so how can we make a human threatening to someone like Piccolo? Well, we have to do what most Japanese horror movies like to do with their characters. Take on their minds. We could perhaps do like a Purple Man/Kilgrave like villain from Jessica Jones with a sort of mind control ability. But yeah, we do have to admit Garlic Jr sort of delves into that, but then again, does he really exist? It's a very interesting concept though. You know, a villain who is not imposing in a physical way, but could threaten our heroes anyway in another manner that they're not prepared for, at the point in the story where everyone is kinda strong and the two strongest ones are gone. And power isn't something you can only describe as physical or magical. It can be described as powerful in terms of influence and resources. We have the Red Ribbon Army as an example, as well as its revised version in Superhero, where it tends to have a sort of big pharma guise, as well as the likes of Lord Jaguar. But how can we make a character like Lord Jaguar competent, and not make them rely on robots or weird clones or other things like that? There is one thing such a character could rely on though: fear. And their fear campaign could target no one other than Big Green himself. After all, some people still remember the temporary tyranny of King Piccolo when he was making his public appearances, which were very unnerving for the populace. Despite that campaign lasting only for about a week or so, it brought about plenty of carnage in that short span of time. And while, yes, Piccolo tends to snap at people fairly frequently at that time, and likes to pretend that the evil is still within him, even though it's not, his moral journey is pretty much complete at this point. Nell's incorporation into his mind was enough to tone down the father in the Namekian to a level which had made him more of an anti-hero character, and by the time Kami joined the party too, he became a full-on good guy, albeit a bit aloof. So if, let's say, someone had seen an opportunity to make his life miserable, to really crush his spirit, and perhaps capitalize on it, that could lead to problems for the Dragon team later. He could immediately snap and start attacking people who would be scared of him, and thusly drag him into becoming a villain again, facing the sins of his father reluctantly. And the best thing about this is that this individual, Lord Jaguar or otherwise, would not have to lie a single time to make people see things the way he does. He would only have to rely on the archive materials about King Piccolo and his son to show how cruel he can be. He wouldn't have to do anything. Just present the facts to people and they'll swallow it. Wait, Masako. Why would this person even do that? What do they have to gain from all this? And why couldn't Piccolo just, off them? Well, yes, that is a good question. But here's our thinking behind it. First, it's to bend Piccolo to his will, to make the Demon King's son work for him, having witnessed firsthand the death and destruction caused by King Piccolo. This baddie would simply want to have an ultimate weapon of his own, which in his mind would be Piccolo Jr, since his father was able to overthrow the King of Earth in a day. Second, this person has access to a vast array of spies and detectives in his personal network that could allow him to televise Piccolo's move without him even knowing it, but they would have to wear very quiet shoes because hearing. So when our Big Green comes to confront them, they just surrender, leaving Piccolo with a dilemma. Do they take down now an unarmed person who had willingly surrendered, or would they strike anyway? The world would be watching whatever he does. But let's give that person some sort of shape, shall we? The name would be Gobo, which is Japanese for burdock. Wait, why are you adding Bardock to this, Masako? It's been done! Funny that you asked though, there is a difference. This does not have much to do with Bardock the character at all, but rather with the greater burdock and its tendency to stick to your clothes. It's really annoying. Something spiky and irritating, kind of like this guy. He would be a rather extravagant middle-aged gentleman dressed in a green-purple suit, a classic Western colour scheme for villains, as well as the natural colours for the greater burdock plants, with well-kept hair and a monocle, And yes, he can have a British accent, I'll allow it. The whole premise of this story would be that Piccolo would try to ignore all the unwanted attention that he would receive. Initially, Gobo would not do this openly, working through some mooks, but still, Piccolo would have to try to move from wasteland to wasteland in order to get away from bystanders and the press. But after a while, all of this would start to get to him, to the point where he would consider violence to stop it, or moving away to Namek for good. He would also want to stay away from Gohan and the rest of the Dragon team during this time, seemingly wanting to deal with this problem alone, but in reality, it's because he's trying to keep Gobo's bad press away from his friends and not bring them into this because they don't deserve it. But he can't tell them a thing about it for risk of bringing them in. Piccolo would get close to snapping and just accept Gobo's conditions to be done with it, thinking that, oh, I'll outlive the man anyway. But unbeknownst to him and the villain, Bulma, Gohan and the Dragon team had figured all of this out on their own, and would promptly sabotage Gobo's spy operation, leaving him with nothing. At the end of the day, Gobo would once again attempt to make Piccolo snap in front of a crowd of people, but the only thing that Piccolo would do would be to punch him in the face, knocking him out. That's it. He would then just fly off, leaving the crowd shocked, confused at the disgraced Gobo, who has some broken teeth and lots of questions to answer for. All the things he had said had not presented itself to the crowd. Piccolo seemed a little grumpy, sure, but nothing like King Piccolo. All of this would teach the Namekian that he can rely on the Z-Fighters for help, and that perhaps sometimes asking for said help is not such a bad idea. You think we're done? No. Here's your twofer. We have one more mini saga for you, and this one is much easier to fit in, and most of you would probably guess where it could be, between ages 764 and 767, the 3-year time skip between Trunks' arrival and the androids showing up. In this space already, we do have Cooler's Revenge, and it fits quite well in there, but I think we can do something more. So even if we discount Cooler from this altogether, we won't do another Freezer race type of baddie. As with all of the returns and reappearances, it's become pretty stale. And we cannot toss in an early android just yet. Remember what we said at the start. We have Goku on Earth and Vegeta out in space somewhere. And most of the movie threats come from space in one way or another, so maybe... how about a demon? A proper demon. If we assume that by the time of the Buu saga, Dabura is around perfect Cell levels of power, I think that someone around Frieza or Cooler's power level could be in, let's say, middle management when it comes to the ranks of demonhood. But how are we going to toss a demonic entity into the mix before the androids, Masako? And more importantly, why? Well, we have some time in which the Dragon Balls weren't really being used, so we can have a group of wannabe cultists, some punks really, finding some old book about demonic entities, the arcane, reading that said demonic entities could grant you superpowers. They would then gather the Dragon Balls and summon one of the random demon names from the book, Shenron not being too happy about this wish, and later pointing out to them before he acted the wish out, well, they could just, you know, ask him to give them the powers instead of relying on demons. Listen, the point of all of this is, these guys aren't very smart, and the being that they would summon would be a very wicked creature indeed. We would call him Pasupu, a play on Pazuzu and soup, and this wicked creature would grant the wishes of his now 3 summoners, turning them into minions, named Tajiro after Butajiru, Misora after Miso, and Adachi after Dashi. Soup-themed baddies. Our heroes would be literally at soup. Tajiro would be an extremely spiky fellow, kind of like Bladelings from D&D. Most of his power would be connected to his, well, spikes, him being able to shoot them out of his body. You get the idea. Misora, on the other hand, would be a being armed with fiery chains that would basically be a part of her body at this point. She would utilize them to catch her opponents and cook them up a little bit. You know, have a little bit of a barbecue with chains. Finally, we would have Adachi, the big, tough, stupid one, with a gargoyle-like physique and an ability to turn himself and others into stone. A little nod to Dabura there. As for Pasupu himself, we would make him a transforming opponent because Dragon Ball. In his first form, he would simply appear as a stone-like floating sarcophagus with vaguely Oni-like features. The minions would have to gather souls for the creature. They would not really kill people though, just steal their life energy. After gathering 54 souls, he would transform into a masked being. The mask would sort of resemble a traditional pop cultural depiction of some Oni masks. Here we'll use Marvel's Ogun as an example. with the body being still covered in stone and the movements being somewhat restrained. After the last surviving minion brings him 108 souls, he would become fully unchained, rocking a more familiar look with being basically a member of Dabura's race with milder facial features, less chin, and horns like those featured on his mask. Why 108 souls, Masako? Well, for all of you Pokemon fans out there, you might think of Spiritomb, whose cultural origins are connected to both the 108 Temptations of Buddha's New Year's Eve tradition and the 108 demons from the classic Chinese novel, Water Margin. Pasupu is a demon, and is kind of basic when it comes to his desires. He would merely wish to be unsealed. Apparently he was sealed many years ago by some Kai, and want to corrupt this newfound world, for his own fun. His power set would be kinda unique too. Whilst Janemba was created from demonic energy, he never really had that corrupting influence on the others. In his first form, we would have Pasupu be able to possess his minions, as well as some of the Z fighters, turning them against each other. In his second form, he could spread more confusion amongst the ranks of our heroes, using perhaps illusions that could have them fight one another and almost beat up some civilians that were just nearby, making them really aggressive, thinking GT Baby here. In Pasupu's final form, he would have access to an anti-spirit bomb of sorts, composed of the energy of negative thoughts and evil deeds. Basically, a classic movie villain, but he would not necessarily look for Goku specifically, and our heroes, the way they discover him, they just happen to come across the individual while he's just doing a task, while his minions are gathering souls. Just happenstance. But what's more important is that the individual under his influence, only possession gives him control, would have some sort of free will. It's just that their negative characteristics are the ones to take charge of the character and the person. During the climactic battle, we would have the Spirit Bomb and the Anti-Spirit Bomb negate each other, and Goku having to seal this Pasupu away in the Malphaba jar to send him back where he came from, away from the mortal realm, where he could no longer corrupt anything. That would give us a proper demon, different from Boo, sort of paying homage to Janemba, and something that could be dealt with in the span of a few days. Of course, his 3 silly minions would be changed back to their regular form, and be urged never to deal with demonic powers again. So that's it. We're not quite done with DBZ yet though, but the next pair would require their own video. We really hoped you liked these ideas, and make sure to share your own ideas with us in the comments, and check out our previous video on this subject if you are interested. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!